Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. President Bongbong Marcos attends the 46th ASEAN Summit in Malaysia as ASEAN leaders push for a unified response to U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs. U.S. President Trump agrees to delay his 50% tariff on European Union imports, buying time for diplomatic talks. And more police personnel are deployed to Bonifacio Global City amid a string of robberies that have raised security concerns in the Taguig business hub. President Donald Trump agrees to delay a 50% tariff on European Union imports, giving global markets temporary relief from an escalating trade standoff. Trump says he spoke with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in what he called a very nice call, prompting the postponement to July 9th. The U.S. president had earlier said that he was not looking for a deal and set a 50% tariff rate to take effect on June 1st, a move that sent shockwaves across global supply chains. Von der Leyen welcomed the delay, posting that Europe is ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively, and underscored that the U.S.-EU trade ties remain the most consequential and close in the world. Looking at the big picture, the delay gives diplomacy a short window, but trade uncertainty continues to cloud business sentiment across both sides of the Atlantic, including key Philippine exporters to Europe. Global markets end Friday in the red as investors react to fresh trade threats from U.S. President Donald Trump, targeting both Europe and tech giant Apple. U.S. and European stocks were sold off after Trump threatened to impose a 25% tariff on Apple products unless they are fully manufactured and sold in the United States rather than in India or in other countries.
On one level, we're still consolidating after the great rebound we've had, but obviously the big news of the day was the 25% tariff on iPhones if Apple doesn't make them in the United States, which we know is a big hurdle, and also the potential 50% tariff on goods coming in from Europe. So I think given that backdrop, being almost back to flat and almost kind of hitting flat a few times throughout the day, it's almost positive and so forth. I mean, it's pretty high hurdles. And I think what it partly tells us is that the market is doing a pretty good job of digesting this sort of new world we're in terms of how Trump negotiates, uses tariffs, and is just sort of taking things a little bit in stride more than certainly they were a month ago.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 0.6%. The Nasdaq lost 0.7%. The S&P lost 0.7%, and the Nasdaq dropped 1%, marking a broad tech-led decline. Over in Europe, the sell-off deepened. London's FTSE 100 shed 0.2%. Germany's DAX lost 1.5%, and France's CAC 40 slipped by 1.7%. Here at home, President Bongbong Marcos calls for a unified ASEAN response to the escalating U.S. tariffs as regional economies face new uncertainty amid global trade tensions. The president is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, for the 46th ASEAN Summit, which runs until May 28th. Top of the agenda, trade, economic security, and maritime disputes, including growing tensions in the South China Sea.
At this summit, I will join fellow ASEAN leaders in reaffirming our commitment to ASEAN centrality as we navigate pressing regional and global challenges, including developments in the South China Sea, the situation in Myanmar, threats to regional peace and maritime security, as well as the far-reaching impacts of climate change, economic volatility, and digital disruption.
In his absence, the president has designated Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin, Justice Secretary Jesus Crispin Remulla, and Agrarian Reform Secretary Conrado Estrella III to oversee day-to-day government operations. President Marcos's push for ASEAN unity comes as Southeast Asian nations weigh how to balance trade ties with the U.S. and China at a time of rising geopolitical and economic volatility. The Philippine economy shows signs of acceleration in the second quarter as easing inflation and steady consumer spending help offset global uncertainty, according to the ASEAN +3 Macroeconomic Research Office, or AMRO. AMRO says household spending is expected to improve, providing a key lift to economic growth this quarter. The group also cites front-loaded export production as firms move ahead of the paused U.S. reciprocal tariffs, adding short-term support to manufacturing output. Private consumption remains resilient amid lower inflation and a steady jobs market. However, AMRO notes that a rebound in private investment is still uncertain after a slowdown in the first quarter, making it a key metric to watch in the coming months. Overall, while second quarter momentum looks promising, the outlook will depend on whether domestic demand holds and trade uncertainty remains contained amid ongoing U.S. tariff risks. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas may shift to a fixed 2% inflation target next year, a potentially major policy change that would align the Philippines with other advanced central banks. BSP Governor Eli Remolona Jr. says that the proposal would replace the current 2 to 4% band with a single, clear target. He adds that the BSP has asked the International Monetary Fund to assess the feasibility of this shift. Under the current policy, the Development Budget Coordination Committee set the 2025 to 2028 inflation target at 2 to 4%, a range that may now be narrowed. While a fixed 2% goal would signal greater commitment to produce stability, it could reduce the BSP's flexibility in responding to supply shocks and domestic volatility. Instead of operating within a range that accommodates temporary inflation spikes from typhoons, global oil shocks, or food supply issues, the BSP may be forced to tighten policy even when inflation is driven by factors outside of its control. This could dampen growth, especially for a vulnerable consumer-driven economy like the Philippines. The Philippines and Canada are gearing up for talks on a possible free trade agreement, with officials set to meet in Canada this June to explore strategic trade opportunities. Trade Undersecretary Alan Gepti says discussions will cover the scope of the deal, level of commitments, and priority sectors for both countries. A potential FTA could boost key Philippine exports like electronics, semiconductors, bananas, and coconuts, while opening the local market to more Canadian meat products. Trade experts say that the deal could help the Philippines reduce reliance on the U.S. and diversify its export base, especially amid rising global protectionism. But farmers are urging caution, calling on negotiators to safeguard local agriculture and push back against potentially burdensome import standards. The FTA talks come as the Philippines looks to strengthen trade ties beyond traditional partners while balancing open markets with protection for vulnerable sectors. The Philippines and Hong Kong begin formal talks on a double taxation agreement, a move seen to boost investor confidence and strengthen bilateral trade ties. Bureau of Internal Revenue Commissioner Romeo Lumagi Jr. confirms that the first round of negotiations took place last week. The proposed treaty includes mechanisms to prevent double taxation, provide tax relief, and establish frameworks for greater cooperation between Philippine and Hong Kong tax authorities. Lumagi says significant progress has been made in drafting provisions on cross-border taxation through several outstanding issues, still need to be resolved in future rounds. A Philippines-Hong Kong DTA could lower tax barriers for investors and exporters while encouraging greater trade, capital flows, and business expansion across both economies. After a string of robberies in Bonifacio Global City, including a high-profile incident involving 2 Korean nationals, the Taguig City PNP is stepping up security measures in the area. Taguig PNP spokesperson Sherilyn Agatarap says police presence in BGC is being increased, particularly at night and during early morning hours. This follows the latest incident where several suspects on motorcycles robbed 2 foreign tourists, taking cash and luxury bags worth an estimated 200,000 pesos.
Meron naman po talaga tayong mga personnel po na naka-deployed po dyan. Nagdagdag pa din po tayo nang sa ganun po mas since kasi di po ba napakalaki naman po talaga ng BGC. So kahit super dami po ng mga PNP personnel natin dyan, parang may instances po na katulad niyan, di po ba? So dinagdagan pa din po natin yung police visibility doon sa area. And then nakipag-coordinate din po tayo sa mga security personnel po ng BGC na kung sakali pong may ganyang incident, makapag-report agad nang sa ganon, agad-agad din po nating matugunan.
The Presidential Anti-Organized Crime Commission says it is now working to enhance tourist security nationwide amid growing concerns from the foreign business community and local stakeholders. With BGC being a key commercial hub and investor magnet, authorities face pressure to restore safety as perceptions of crime can undermine business confidence and tourism. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on Asian markets this Monday morning as investors weigh rate outlooks, trade uncertainty, and regional policy signals. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is in the green, up by 0.6%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is going the other way, lower by 0.6%. Shanghai's Composite higher, up by 0.2%. And Singapore's Straits Times Index lower by 0.2%. Here at home, the PSC index jumped 1.7% to 64.13 last Friday. This as investors welcomed policy continuity in Malacanang and signals of further rate cuts from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Week on week, however, the PSC still posted a decline of 0.8%, snapping a 5-week winning streak. BSP Governor Eli Remolona's remarks on 2 possible rate cuts this year are helping boosting market sentiment, offsetting worries over the United States credit outlook and debt trajectory. Analysts say that in the near term, the PSEI could revisit the 6,600 level if momentum holds, though global headwinds could still trigger volatility. Technically speaking, support is seen at 6290 to 6400, while resistance is at 6600 to 6650. Investors are being advised to stay selective, monitor policy signals closely, and focus on stocks with strong fundamentals. Now, as of 10:18 this morning, the main gauge is in the red, lower by 0.5% to 63.83. All shares index in the red as well, lower by 0.2% to 37.39. Now, as for the sub-indices, we're seeing a mixed picture here. The financials, holding firms, property, and services counters are in the red, whereas the industrial and mining and oil counters are in the green, with the mining and oil counter up sharply in early trade, up by 2%. So far, volume is at 91 million shares and value is at 647 million pesos. Market breadth is positive with 64 advancers, 53 decliners, and 40 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at the currency market, the peso opens flat at 55.25 to the greenback, unchanged from its previous close. Now, while policy clarity from the BSP is supporting local sentiment, our markets remain sensitive to global credit risks, geopolitical shocks, and foreign inflows. The ongoing reorganization under the Marcos administration may affect more officials and appointees as Malacanang intensifies its performance review across key agencies. Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin says officials from research units and other support agencies may also be replaced as part of the broader evaluation. He emphasizes that President Ferdinand Marcos is giving priority to heads of agencies directly involved in the delivery of basic services. Bersamin adds the evaluation is being done gradually, one at a time. The cabinet shakeup signals a push for greater accountability and performance, but also raises questions about political alignments, continuity, and potential disruption to economic reforms. President Marcos keeps his core economic team even if his administration enters a period of major transition. By retaining Finance Secretary Ralph Recto, NEDA Chief Arsenio Balisacan, Budget Secretary Amena Pangandaman, Trade Secretary Cristina Roque, and Investment Secretary Frederick Go, the president is sending a clear message that he wants continuity and stability on the economic front. But politically, the ground is shifting following midterm poll setbacks, a growing rift with the Duterte camp and an impeachment trial against the vice president on the horizon. So what happens next, and how will this shape the final half of the Marcos administration? Joining us now to share his read on the strategy and the stakes is veteran political strategist Lito Panayao. Hi, Lito. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Good morning, Maiki, and thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about. Beginning with the first wave, the core economic team has been retained, a few exits confirmed. What's your read on this situation? And from your vantage point, is this reset about better governance or more about consolidating power ahead of 2028, or a mix of both?
Well, first of all, the economic team has been retained. But then again, bad politics means bad economics. So if you have bad politics, you cannot repair the impact on the economy. No? Now, it obviously is they call it a reset, but it's obviously damage control because of the results of the past elections, which, no matter how you look at it, is a repudiation of the president's performance. No? And so that is the problem. They're now trying to control the damage wrought by the previous elections, the recent elections. And I don't know how it will really work out. For one, the initial cabinet reset does not give you much to hope for. It's basically musical chairs. Nobody new has come in. Now, the way they treated, for instance, Jerry Acusar of the HSUD, where they said that he was underperforming, is not a problem of Mr. Acusar, whom they got from the private sector. It's really a function of no budget.
Yeah, did
so
Congress
without
give
the
you the
budget,
money?
how can you produce socialized housing without money?
Your hands are tied.
Yes. In the case of Secretary Yulo Loizaga of DENR, the reason given was that she's been traveling too often. Now, as far as I know, cabinet members cannot travel without travel authorities granted by the office of the president. So shouldn't they have measured this in time? Shouldn't performance appraisal be done periodically, and not only because the elections delivered a strong message against the administration? So these are the questions, no? And the way they treated these two officials, for instance, a real cabinet revamp should get the best talents from the private sector or elsewhere. But if you're from the private sector and you see that these two officials were treated that way, would you have any incentive to join government? Or would you rather, when the rewards are better, you've got better pay in the private sector to begin with? No? So I don't, we'll have to wait, of course, for the next round of changes in the cabinet to really see whether they mean business or it's just pure damage control.
Okay, you say damage control. You mentioned two things, bad politics and damage control. Can you elaborate on these two fronts? Why do you think we're in a situation of bad politics? And what was the damage done that needs to be repaired?
Well, in the first place, you have a 2025 budget, which is which was mangled by Congress. No, 6.3 trillion, but that was mangled by Congress. From the National Expenditure Program, which is called the President's Budget, they simply allocated it to their ayuda, their pork barrel entitlements and everything. No? So that is why other sectors which needed the money, agriculture, social services, education, health, lost a lot of money. So where is the problem? It's not in the cabinet. The problem is in Congress. The problem is that if you really want reforms, you'd have to do something about the way Congress acts on important measures such as the budget. The budget, after all, is the National Economic Program in pesos and centavos.
Correct.
And it's the single most important legislative measure that passes through Congress. No? The other elephant in the room, of course, which would impede major changes in the legislature this year is the impeachment. The impeachment of Vice President Inday Sara, which will go through a trial in the Senate. No? And everyone's attention will be focused on that. No? So again, the economy is put behind the scene, and on center stage will be politics. No? So these are the things. Earlier, you were reading some of the PSCI reports. No? For the past year and a half, maybe even 2 years, it's been moving sideways. No?
Yeah, longer than that.
Yeah, longer than that. No? So do we expect any changes over the next year or two before the president's term expires?
Taking a look at where the market is, why we haven't moved. It's a lot about foreign direct investment. That's what we need. But what is this? How would you describe the state of politics in the Philippines today? And as an investor looking into the Philippines, taking a look at where we are and what all this political noise, how do you think they're judging us?
Well, they would wait and see for the next administration. Because if you see so much political instability, so much infighting, no? So much stabbing in the back, no? And since, as we said, bad politics impacts on economics, no? Then you'd rather wait and see, which is, we've been overtaken in terms of foreign direct investment by our neighbors in ASEAN. That probably will continue. And then you have tourism, which should be one of the low-hanging fruits, no? But nobody's coming to the Philippines. One, because of our foreign policy, which, China is obviously retaliating on our foreign policy directions by limiting the number of tourists coming over to the Philippines. It is, after all, a relatively authoritarian state. No? And secondly, have we solved problems of accessibility? No? Air transport in this country is super, super expensive. I was just one-way trip to Cebu, for instance, cost me 11,700. No? I mean, one way. And the return trip had to be on another aircraft because there's a lack of aircraft. No? Siargao often goes 27, 28,000 round trip. No? You have bad accommodation facilities and very expensive compared to Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Bali for that matter.
Yeah.
So all of these, accessibility, and again, power costs. No? Electricity costs are very unattractive, because we're just about the highest in the region.
There's a lot going on, which is why we need our politicians to really hit the ground running, especially with this new set of lawmakers coming after the midterm elections. If you step back and take a look at it from a broader scope, fundamentally, what's broken and what's broken and what still works within our political system?
Fundamentally, the political system sucks. No? We have been imprisoned in the 1987 Constitution, which allows a multi-party system in a presidential form of government. No? So we have a plethora of parties that just emerge anytime.
No real political parties.
No real political parties, no really strong political institutions in this country. No? So it's a function of personal ambition. Someone who wants to run for president comes up with a party. Or the parties are controlled by oligarchs. Oligarchic economic interests who want regulatory capture to favor them. No? So that is the situation. So unless we seriously come up with reforms in the political system through a constitutional change, nothing will happen. The political system will engender the kind of public servants, politicians that we have. And unfortunately, because this is already the midterm of the president's term of office, and the results of the elections have not been good for him, it is going to be very difficult for him to try changing the Constitution for the better.
That said, Lito, can you describe the amount of political capital President Bongbong Marcos has in these last 3 years of the administration?
Well, in the last tracking of a credible poll research firm, Pulse Asia, they said it was 25% public approval rating with similar trust rating. That is very, very low. On the contrary, the person who they have been trying to demonize for the past 2 years, Vice President Inday Sara, who's facing trial in the Senate by June 2, is getting 52% approval rating. No? So what does that say?
She's a strong
So you have very
contender.
little political capital to push through with major reforms.
Okay. Speaking of 2028, that may seem distant, but if you're gunning for the presidency, that starts now. Last week, we heard Senator Risa Ontiveros open to running for president in 2028. From where you sit, who has the profile, the network, and the momentum to really mount a strong presidential campaign?
If she escapes conviction in the Senate, the network and the momentum is definitely with Vice President Inday Sara. On the other hand, look at the Senate, where normally we have material for the presidency. I would venture to guess that the two independents, or shall we say the traditional opposition, Bam Aquino and Kiko Pangilinan, will join the majority, no? Because they need committees, no? And therefore, you will have a minuscule minority, perhaps in the singular person of Senator Risa Ontiveros. Bam, because he would want to push through his advocacies in education and youth and education, and Kiko would want to push his advocacy on food security and agricultural productivity. Without a committee, because you're in the minority, you cannot push those advocacies.
Pushing that envelope even further, Lito, do you think that VP Sara Duterte will be impeached?
Right now, the numbers suggest that she will not.
552.
Yeah, in a program also here in Bilyonaryo during the election countdown, I said that my count was she has 11 sure votes. And all you need is 9. No? But that would depend, of course, on how the evidence is presented, no? in the Senate by the congressional prosecutors. No? But then again, you have, shall say, a monkey wrench on the whole process. No less than the campaign manager of Alianza, Congressman Toby Tiangco, said that he was against impeachment, that the impeachment was ill-timed, it was rushed February 5 when Congress was about to recess. And thirdly, that it was tied up to the releases of 4 conditional allocations. So that throws not only a legal problem, that also throws shall we say, a moral problem. Does it mean that the congressmen who signed 215 of them within 8 hours, did they read the articles of impeachment? And 2, were they bribed to sign? Or were they promised allocations to be able to sign as fast as that?
Well, it's with the Senate now. She's a strong contender for 2028. Should, unless this is derailed by a conviction, who else do you think could emerge? You know, should VP Sara be out of the running by a conviction, who else could emerge as a strong contender for president?
Well, of course, you have that well-known brand, recently well-known brand called the Tulfo brand. No? So probably Rafi Tulfo, no? The older brother of Erwin, would probably be considered a presidential contender. But I would wish also that some genuine reformists who have shown managerial capabilities, someone like Mayor Benji Magalong of Baguio, could up his national profile together with other well-known and credible politicians. Like, for instance, Vico Soto is too young, no, to go for the presidency in 2028, but his term is expiring. He could probably aspire for the Senate, and you would have a good new voice in the Senate. No? So these are, all of course, is in a flux. No? Right now, there isn't much to hope for in terms of who's going to be president in 2028.
It's 3 years to go. You know, given the composition of our lawmakers now, when you saw that final Senate lineup, what was your initial reaction, and what do you think that says about where we're headed these next 3 years?
It's going to be rather contentious again in the Senate, no? Because definitely, no matter how you slice it, no, the president's candidates fared badly, especially when you consider that his candidates were well-known brands. Lacson, Soto, Tulfo, Cayetano, these are well-known political brands. And you have the PDP Laban slate, which was, except for Bongo and Bato, generally unknown. Now you have a Marcoleta seizing number 6, I think, or number 7. No? And you have two outliers, Camille Villar and Aimee Marcos, who obviously will be going through to the opposition side. No?
Yeah. Talking about the Magic 12, you know, Okta and Pulse Asia projections were kind of off. Was the ground changing too quickly for the surveys to catch up, or was there something essentially missing in the surveys? Why did we not see what was coming ahead?
Well, my reading of it is first, Bam and Kiko stuck to their message, which is always a good thing when you're running for a national office. No? So while everybody was talking about the ICC, about the impeachment versus oppressive tactics or abuses on the part of the administration, they were sticking to what we call the politics of the stomach and the issues that mattered to the people. No? Education, health, unemployment, food security, agricultural productivity. No? So they were able to capture the imagination of the young, especially, who were tired of the political noise. No? And secondly, I would think that in certain regional areas of strength, they fared very well. I would think that in Bicol, for that matter, where former Vice President Lenny is still a considerable political figure, they had strong support there. They had strong support in Iloilo, which is generally considered a yellow or bastion, no? So, and then they fared very well in the Lingayen to Lucena corridor.
Okay, sir, going back to the revamp of this cabinet, you've been in this business as a political strategist for over 4 decades. You've advised former administrations. Who do you think should be in this current cabinet? And perhaps pushing it further, who do you think doesn't deserve to be there?
Well, first of all, aside from the efficiency or the productivity of cabinet officials, what matters for the presidency is good communications. And let's face it, communications has been a massive failure under this president administration. 4 press secretaries in less than 3 years, and now a 5th press secretary is possible. No? You have a spokesperson who sometimes you wonder if it's the president's opinions or her opinions that is coming out daily. No? So that has to be cured, communications. And I don't know who they can think of to replace the present players in the communications department. Tourism is pretty bad. No? There are major issues that have to be considered. Accessibility, affordability of accommodations and plane fares, no? Infrastructure, so many things have to be addressed quite forcefully because it is a low-hanging fruit. No? Sayang. No? I think foreign direct investment will be in the doldrums no matter what we do. You have a good PEZA head. You've got a good BOI career official there. But then again, the push should really come from Secretary Derek Go and DTI Secretary Cristina Roque. No? But again, that's impacted by economic headwinds from Trump and everywhere
of course,
else.
Global risk factors. They've retained the economic team. What does this say about where we're headed and the priorities of this administration?
Well, I hope they retain the good performers. No? Vince Dizon is doing a marvelous job. Rex Gatchalian is very forthright. No? It's doing very well. To a certain extent, even young guys like, the DILG Secretary, John Vic Remulla, except for that flack about the rendition of President Duterte, former President Duterte. No? But offhand, maybe they should look at the second-layer officials. No?
Okay.
Agency heads which matter, LTO, LTFRB. The things are daily, the things which impact on the daily lives of people. No?
Okay, as we wrap up, sir, what message would you like to leave to the president and to this and whoever he selects to help him in his efforts to really shore up the next 3 years?
Well, first, I think they should really try their best to get talents from the private sector. no, for the cabinet departments that impact directly on people and that could shore up the economy, they should try to harness private sector talent and not just do a musical chairs, a rigodon as they call it.
Yeah.
I
Are there
transfer one
specific
from the
people
other.
from the private sector that you would like to see in the cabinet?
No,
sir?
I can't without any, you know, they might be put on the spot, no? But I hope they can induce private talent to join cabinet, no? Like Vince Dizon came from the private sector already, although he was in government before, no? Where he also did the marvelous job when he was head of the co-chair of the COVID, the interagency task force on COVID reaction. No? There are many, but I don't know if they would be enticed.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, veteran political strategist Lito Banayao.
Always a pleasure.
We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. The proposed MRT-4 project from Ortigas to Taytay could now cost up to 100 billion pesos, nearly double its original estimate, after officials decided to switch from a monorail to a heavier metro rail system to handle surging commuter demand. A transportation official says that the upgrade was necessary to address severe congestion in Manila's eastern corridor, where daily commutes can stretch up to 3 hours. The MRT-4 is designed to slash travel time to just 30 minutes and accommodate around 200,000 commuters per day. Loan negotiations are ongoing, with construction targeted to begin after final designs are completed in 2026. The 12.7-kilometer line aims to connect Metro Manila with parts of Rizal, promising a much-needed mass transit upgrade for one of the capital's most traffic-choked corridors. The big picture, the escalating cost reflects the growing scale of urban transport needs as the Philippines races to expand rail infrastructure and ease the gridlock in Mega Manila. On another front, yields on the Philippine government's short and long-term borrowings may end mixed this week as global credit risks weigh on investor sentiment. RCBC's chief economist Michael Ricafort says Moody's downgrade of the U.S. credit rating has put pressure on U.S. Treasuries, rippling into the local bond market. Today, the Bureau of Treasury will auction off 25 billion pesos in Treasury bills, while tomorrow the government is set to offer 30 billion pesos in reissued 20-year T-bonds. With global debt worries back in focus, local yield movements may reflect both domestic funding needs and broader risk sentiment, including foreign demand for peso-denominated assets. FirstGen Corporation is looking to build more liquefied natural gas or LNG terminals outside Batangas to keep pace with the country's growing power demand. Senior Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer Vincent Martin Villegas says the move aims to expand the country's LNG infrastructure, but stresses that adequate market demand will be key to justifying any new investments. The Lopez-led firm currently has 2 operating LNG terminals. One is owned and operated by its subsidiary, FGen LNG Corporation, while the other is a joint project with Meralco Power Gen, Therma Natgas Power, and San Miguel Global Power. As the Philippines transitions to cleaner energy sources, LNG is expected to play a critical role in meeting baseload power needs, but expansion will depend on demand growth, investor appetite, and regulatory support. Now, 2 major power producers, Energy Resources Incorporated and South Premier Power Corporation, are set to deliver a combined 2,500 megawatts to the Luzon grid by the end of May, providing much-needed relief amid supply strains. The supply will come from their natural gas plants in Batangas, jointly owned by 3 of the country's biggest energy players, Bilyonaryo Manny Panglina's Meralco Power Gen, Bilyonaryo Ramon Ang's San Miguel Corporation, and Aboitiz Power Corporation led by Bilyonaryo Sabin Aboitiz. The capacity boost comes as the Luzon grid grapples with repeated red and yellow alerts issued in recent weeks by the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines due to tight supply and rising demand. With temperatures rising and demand for power surging, the entry of 2,500 megawatts could stabilize the grid, but longer-term solutions to energy security remain critical for Philippine growth. Filipino volunteers, along with Korean pop artists and musicians from Indonesia and Malaysia, are set to hold the first ever sea concert for peace and solidarity at the West Philippine Sea. The group is on board the civilian ship Kapitan Felix Oca for a mission running from May 26th to the 30th. Local acts include veteran artists Noel Cabangon and Ebe Dancel, who will perform in a pre-departure event in El Nido, Palawan, where the ship is expected to arrive today. The concert itself will take place on May 27 near Pag-asa Island, marking a rare cultural gathering in the disputed waters. Beyond music, the group will also deliver aid to Filipino fishermen operating near Pag-asa Island, part of the Kalayaan Island group. The mission blends cultural diplomacy with civilian solidarity, sending a peaceful yet symbolic message amid growing tensions in the West Philippine Sea. We're taking a quick breather. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. U.S. President Donald Trump continues to take aim at Harvard, announcing plans to reduce the number of foreign students at the Ivy League school. Trump demanded Harvard hand over the names of its international students.
Well, look, part of the problem with Harvard is that there are about 31%, almost 31% of foreigners coming to Harvard. We give them billions of dollars, which is ridiculous. We do grants, which we're probably not going to be doing much grants anymore to Harvard. But they're 31%, but they refuse to tell us who the people are. We want to know who the people. We have Americans that want to go there and to other places, and they can't go there because you have 31% foreign. Now, no foreign government contributes money to Harvard. We do. So why are they doing so many? Number one. Number two, we want a list of those foreign students, and we'll find out whether or not they're okay. Many will be okay, I assume, and I assume with Harvard, many will be bad. And then the other thing is they're very anti-Semitic. Everybody knows they're anti-Semitic, and that's got to stop immediately.
Last week, his administration revoked Harvard's authority to enroll foreign students, a move the university slammed as unconstitutional. A federal judge has temporarily blocked that order, putting the fight on hold for now. U.S. President Donald Trump lashes out at Russian President Vladimir Putin following what Ukraine calls the most intense aerial assault since the start of the war. Over the weekend, Russia unleashed hundreds of drones and missiles on Ukrainian cities, including the capital of Kiev, in a wave of strikes that killed at least 12 people and wounded dozens more.
Not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all, okay? We're in the middle of talking, and he's shooting rockets into Kiev and other cities. I don't like it at all.
Mr. President, what do you want to do about that?
I'm surprised. I'm very surprised. We'll see what we're going to do.
Trump condemned the attacks and said his administration is considering additional sanctions against Russia. He also renewed calls for a ceasefire in the 3-year-old conflict, though peace talks remain stalled. The escalation comes amid growing pressure on the U.S. to take a tougher stance on Russia, even as Trump tries to strike a balance between sanctions and diplomatic outreach. The Indian Navy and Coast Guard successfully rescued all 24 crew members of a Liberian-flagged cargo ship that capsized off the coast of Kerala on Sunday. The vessel, MSC Elsa 3, was en route from the port of Vizhinjam to Kochi when it encountered trouble Saturday and called for a distress call. The Navy aircraft dispatched to the area located 2 life rafts and spotted the ship listing dangerously in rough waters. The crew, composed of nationalities from the Philippines, Georgia, Russia, and Ukraine, were all safely brought to shore. Indian authorities are now monitoring the area for any signs of an oil spill. The incident highlights the critical role of regional maritime forces in ensuring crew safety and raises environmental concerns in one of Asia's busiest shipping corridors. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.